Okay, it is now 6 o'clock. I'm gonna get started, and then if people join late, that's fine. We're just gonna get this ball rolling. Welcome everyone to How to Go Solar Plus Storage. I'm excited to get learning today. Alrighty. So the agenda, some things we're going to cover today is just basics of how solar works, whether an individual's home is right for solar, the start of some energy storage, and then incentives and what does getting started look like. This training is put on by Solar Oregon. So we are a 40-year-old nonprofit. My name is Kate, and I'm in that picture there. We work with solar education outreach. We're all about trying to get folks into solar and just educating on how to go solar. We do these trainings, which you're a part of, so welcome. Thank you so much. We also give solar tours, and we have a Solarize campaign. We also provide some peer-to-peer education. So please support our work. Like I said, we're a nonprofit. So if you would like to donate or become a member, please do so. I'm going to drop some links into the chat. Some of these links make sense for right now. Some of them might not. We'll get to them later, but I'm just going to drop them all just so we have them. Let's see. Okay, great. Yeah, so if you'd like to donate to us, that's wonderful. Every little bit helps. Or if you'd like to become a member, you can find more information on our website or follow us on social media. The work we do is made possible through Energy Trust of Oregon. So they're a nonprofit. They work on providing access to affordable energy. They work within the customers of Portland General Electric, and Pacific Power, Northwest Natural, Cascade Natural Gas, and Avista. So they are really an amazing program, and through their help, our work is made possible. So some things that are important for this evening. We prefer that folks use the Q&A chat, the Q&A box, not the chat, to ask any questions. I'm going to get to those questions at the end of the webinar. So if you have any questions that come up while I'm going through the presentation, that's wonderful. Please put them in the Q&A. The chat is more for conversation, or if you want to check in with your other participants. We also are going to be doing some polls. So the first one I'm going to pop up right now, and this just helps us kind of get to know folks a little bit better. So I'm going to launch that and give you about 30 seconds. Alrighty, so if you could please answer this and then some of the following ones. Very cool. It looks like we've got some folks from out of state. So if you're feeling up to it and you want to throw into the chat where you're joining from, that would be awesome, just because I'm curious. Alrighty, and then I'm going to launch 2 more polls while that's going on. All right, I'm going to give this one about 10 more seconds. Awesome. Oh, Washington. All right, great. California, very cool. Welcome. Okay, and then one last poll. This is just something that Energy Trust likes us to ask. So yeah, this is the last poll before we move into the content. And again, I'll really just let this run for about 30 seconds. Okay, awesome. Let's get into it. Okay, so let's just kind of start thinking about how solar works. There's some key components to a solar system. There's the photovoltaic, that PV panel that we all think of when we think of solar. That is going to create DC energy, which needs to be converted to AC energy. And for that, we have inverters or microinverters. Those inverters are connected to your home electrical panel that feeds your house. And then that's connected to a utility meter, which is a two-way meter that goes to the utility grid and then back to your home. So this is different than the standard utility meter, which is just one directional. This is bidirectional. And then that connects you to the grid and to your home. So those inverters, they come in some different sizes. So on the right side here, we see a microinverter, and that's smaller. It's connected underneath the PV panel. On the left side, we see just your kind of standard inverter. Those are a little bit bigger. Those are connected to your electrical panel. So the one that's pictured here is a little different than the standard inverter, what it would look like, because this is outside. Typically, these would be placed inside in your garage or in your basement, just wherever your electrical panel is. This one just happens to be outside. But this is just a good idea of what those different inverters can look like. And whichever inverter you go with, both function the same. It's just a matter of what your solar contractor thinks is right for you. And solar contractor is a term I'm going to use a lot. That's just the person who helps you set up your system. They're kind of your go-to guy or woman or person when you're kind of going into getting solar. So yeah, inverters, microinverters, functionally, they're the same. It just depends on whichever setup you get. There's a couple different mounts you could get. So a ground mount or a roof mount. So a ground mount, as you can see here, is one that's on the ground on the right side. And then a roof mount is connected to your roof. So it really just depends on what a person's setup is. Roof mounts definitely are the standard, just because if you think of space and efficiency, they're a lot more efficient because they're just using your roof space. But ground mounts are definitely an option. You know, if you're choosing one over the other, it really is kind of a cost benefit analysis that needs to be done. Ground mounts have some expenses because you have to run wiring underground, copper wires underground to connect the mount to your home. And that can cost quite a bit of money, especially because copper is expensive. Roof mounts, maybe if you have a roof that's not right for solar, there's some expenses that could come with that. So it really does depend on the individual setup, whether you do roof mount or ground mount, but roof is definitely the more common of the two. So net metering. So I was talking about that two-way utility meter. So that comes into net metering. So I'm going to kind of walk you through the two different graphs here. So we've got summer months, winter months, gaining credits, using credits. So what this is showing is the amount of electricity in kilowatt hours that's produced. Sorry, I keep doing that. That's produced. And then you also have the amount that's consumed from the grid. So in summer months, we're producing more solar than you're consuming for the grid. So you have this net credit earned. And then during winter months, when things are a little darker, you're not going to be producing as much energy from your solar system. You're going to be taking more from the grid. You're going to be drawing. And so what net metering is when you have this overproduction in the summer months, you're producing more solar than you're using from the utility, you get credits. And those credits, the way I describe it is they kind of go into a bank. That's not a literal bank, but it's a bank that then during those winter months, when you're producing less solar, you can draw into and get those solar credits. And so that's what net metering is. And that's why you have a two-way utility meter that's going to be speaking to the grid, but also to your home, because that's going to be as you're getting credits and using credits, that shifts. But overall, you're just working towards reducing your energy bill, which is great. It's what we all want. You know, saving money is always a good thing. So now we're going to kind of get into thinking about whether an individual home is right for solar. So as I'm going through these steps, I'd like you just to keep in mind what your home looks like, what the setup is, just because I think it makes it easier. So system size. So system size is based on how much electricity you consume. So when I was talking about that net metering, that's something that rolls over month to month. So they're tracking that net metering month to month. It begins in March and goes to March of the next year, but it does not roll over annually. So when you're creating a system size, you want something where you can get those credits in the summer, but so you're not overproducing because it does not roll over annually. So it doesn't do you any good to overproduce. So there's no point in creating like a giant solar system because it just won't do you any favors. It's going to cost a lot of money up front. It makes the most sense to create a size that's more in keeping with the amount of electricity you already consume before the solar system goes in, because you want those credits to balance, but you don't necessarily want to overproduce. So system size is really based on the amount of electricity you consume. So before you get a solar system, your solar contractor will look at your past utility bills and see how much you've consumed. And based on that, they'll create a solar system size. There's some other factors that come into play when thinking about sizing, the available space. So if you're doing a roof mount, thinking about how much roof space you have, whether it's a complex roof or a simple roof. It also would, if you're doing a ground mount, how much ground space do you have? What's your budget, from the offset? And then, kind of some basic aesthetics, if that's important to you. Solar systems are measured in kilowatts. So the average, this is the very basic average. It can be much lower than this. It can be much higher than this, is about 6 kilowatts, which equals about 18 to 20 panels. So that's about the average size. But again, it really can vary depending on your amount of consumption, on what's available to you. That's just kind of an average. So in regards to solar access, so this is what this is showing is the path of the sun during the summer months and then the path of the sun during those winter months. South facing roofs are the best for solar in Oregon. They get the most direct sunlight. East and west facing roofs are also great options. South is definitely the best. North facing roofs aren't really an option here in Oregon. If you have a north facing roof, to put solar on that doesn't really make a lot of sense. South is definitely the best, with east and west both being great alternatives. Shade. So shade does affect the amount of energy you're able to consume. If your roof is too shaded, it could prevent you from placing panels in certain areas. That being said, with shade, it's kind of hard to self-assess, because say you're going to work and coming home from work during certain hours of the day, you might not actually have a clear view of what is being shaded during peak sunlight hours. So you're going to want to talk to your solar contractor. This is something that they'll assess when they're doing your quote, is looking how much shade is affecting your roof, and they'll be able to help you out with what's a good idea of what's affecting you. Okay, roof complexity. So this is just kind of a general example of a complex roof versus a simple roof. So when I was talking about sizing, I brought up this example. Simple is definitely the best because you want to, if you think about it, create a system that's just continuous. Complex roofs, if you have a complex roof, that doesn't mean you can't go solar. Some roofs are too complex, but it just might affect the amount of size for the system that you have. Again, this is something that your solar contractor would go over with you when they do the quote. They'd look at what your setup is and what makes the most sense. So if you have a super complex roof, just make sure you talk to a professional before you self-assess, because that can be hard to do. But it is, if you have a simple roof, that's definitely a benefit. Another thing to consider is roof age. I think this is one of the more important things to consider personally, just because it really does affect whether you can or when you can go solar. So kind of the minimum we say for roof life is about 10 years. That's because there's some incentives that you are not able to get if you don't have 10 years of roof life, but also it's just a good kind of standard that 10 is the minimum you want on your roof. And the reason why this matters is because if you do put on a solar system and you have less than 10 years, so say you have 5 years, so you put on solar and then 5 years later you have to re-roof, and then you need to remove that solar. So you have to pay for the solar to get taken off, then you have to pay to re-roof, and then you have to pay to put the solar back on. That can be a lot of cost. So a better alternative is just to wait the 5 years to put on the solar in the first place, and then re-roof and do the solar at the same time. Or if you know that you have 20 years left on your roof, you're good. But it is something to consider. And again, these are questions that your solar contractor will go over with you. If you have a metal roof, this is a little bit less of an issue for you, but it's definitely something you'll want to consider. All right, so the next thing I'm going to get into is roof structures. So when I'm talking about roof structures, there's one important thing to note. This is really just for folks who live in the Portland area, and that's because there's specific building codes that people who live in Portland have to follow. So this doesn't necessarily affect folks who live outside of Portland in other parts of Oregon. So we'll get into it. There's two kind of basic kind of roof structures. You've got trusses and you've got rafters. If you have trusses, then you also don't really need to worry about what I'm saying. But if you have rafters and if you live in an older home, something that the solar contractor is going to look at is your roof span. And if your roof span is too wide, they're going to want to have your home evaluated by an engineer, and the engineer just has to kind of look at your setup. They don't even come in person. They just look at your blueprints, let you know whether you have to get reinforced or not. And then you might have to pay to have it reinforced. You will also have to pay for the engineer. But from the jump, this is something that your solar contractor can tell you whether you need to follow the steps to get in touch with the engineer in the first place. And the reason why this code exists isn't necessarily because they're worried about any weight on your roof. Solar panels are actually pretty light. But what it is in effect for is there's a gap between the roof and the solar panel when you put in solar, and wind goes between that gap and it creates a lift. And so that's what the code is kind of protecting against. That being said, this is a particularly strict code, so I don't want folks who live outside of Portland to think that they're in any danger. It just happens that Portland has more rigid rules. And so this is something that your solar contractor will look at regardless of whether you live in Portland or if you live in other parts of Oregon. But if you live in Portland, there's a chance that you will have to have your roof restabilized and have it looked at by an engineer. But again, solar contractor will look at that for you. Okay, solar plus storage. So if we look at this picture, this is just an example of energy resilience. So we have a neighborhood where everything is dark, and then there's this beacon of light that is still shining during a outage. So that's what this is trying to show, is during an outage, if you have energy resilience, you'll still have light. And solar plus storage make both more efficient. So why are we worried about energy resilience? There's a lot of reasons why the utility might go down or why the grid might go down. Squirrels and storms are the most common thing to affect the grid. So something that's becoming more common definitely are public safety power shutdowns. So with those wildfires we had last summer and the summer before, some utility grids shut down power, and that's becoming more common as fires unfortunately become more common, and as utilities want to protect themselves and just protect people, they will have an increase in shutdowns. That's something that's becoming more and more common. Something that's not common because it has not yet happened, but it has been indicated as a possible risk is cyber attacks, so that the utility grid could be targeted for a cyber attack. Ooh, can't talk today. Cyber attack. Like I said, it hasn't happened yet, but it could happen. And then the last one is the Cascadia seismic hazard. So I grew up in Portland. I grew up learning about the big one. There has been a study that said I'm trying to think the number. If this does, or when this does happen, there could be up to 6 weeks of outages, and that's in Portland. So outside of Portland, it could go on for longer. So, you know, yes, the likelihood of this happening in our lifetime could be minor, but the effect it has is pretty drastic. So it's definitely something to think about, why we need energy resilience. Okay, so solar plus storage. So the reason why solar and storage work really well together is during an outage, your battery could be charged and that would help run part of your home. And then during your day, your solar is connected to your battery and it's helping to recharge that battery. So you're kind of creating a system where the solar is charging the battery during the day, and then during the night, the battery is running your home if the grid is down. So this is a really great system. This is kind of why they go hand in hand. But it is a partial backup. So we'll get into that a little bit later. Well, it doesn't have to be, but one battery will not charge your whole home. So there's a couple different battery selections. We are brand agnostic. This is just kind of showing you that there's a couple different ways. If you do go with storage, there's a couple different companies to go with. So I kind of said this earlier, but partial versus whole home backup. So if we're talking about a single battery will not be able to back up a whole home. Instead, what you're looking at is a partial backup. Now, that doesn't mean that you can't have a whole home backup. It just means that you'd have to buy more batteries. And so that's more expense. And a partial backup does allow you a level of resilience that's already great. But if it's important to you to be totally backed up, that's a personal preference. That just would mean more cost. So when we're looking at a difference between a whole home backup and a partial backup, we've got one battery versus these 3 batteries. It's also kind of cool to see that these batteries aren't like huge. They're not massive. They're not going to take up a lot of room. But there is definitely difference between a partial and a whole home backup. So when we're thinking about system sizing, this is kind of similar when we're thinking about solar sizing. We're thinking about what needs power and for how long. Those are kind of the major questions we ask. It's also important to look at, when you're creating a battery, what you already put a lot of energy into, because that can often tell us what's important for us to power. And the way to think about this is kind of this handoff. So what needs power and for how long? So say we want to power a refrigerator, a couple of lights, maybe a couple outlets to charge laptops or phones. And then how long will we have if we have just those things? If we add more to power, we're going to lose time. So say you live in a really cold part of Oregon and it's important to add a heater. That's totally fine. You can add a heater, but it means that you're going to have less power or less time to power your what you need to. So it's just kind of a balancing act of what's important to you to power and for how long. And so the essential loads panel. So once you do decide what's important to power, you create a new circuit in your essential loads panel. And what this does is it's taking existing circuits that get rerouted into this new one. And that can be switched on and off, that panel can, when the power goes out. And so that will, you know, run that refrigerator, that outlet, and whatever your other needs are. Okay, so getting into some incentives. So something that's just kind of cool to look at, this is showing national trends before incentives. This is the cost of PV systems. And this is just showing since 2010 to 2019, the national trend of this decline in PV price, which is really awesome to see. It's just becoming more and more accessible. And again, this is pre-incentives. So adding incentives makes it even cheaper. But this is just kind of a cool national trend as solar gets more popular and more accessible. So there's a couple different incentives. These are kind of the major ones in Oregon. So we've got the solar investment tax credit, solar and storage rebate, and then Energy Trust of Oregon has some incentives. So the solar investment tax credit, that's 26%. That comes at the end. That's the last incentive that gets put on someone's budget, that you do have to be tax liable for. What I will say is I'm not a tax professional. So with that tax credit, you do have to talk to a tax professional. So if you have someone already, that's awesome. If not, find a tax professional and talk to them, because it is one that you have to implement on your own. These other incentives will be worked on by your solar contractor. They'll be the ones to set up the incentives for you. But the federal tax credit is one that you have to do on your own with a tax professional, because it is a federal program. So it's got its own kind of rules and regulations. But ones that will be set up for you by your solar contractor are the solar and storage rebate. So that can be up to $5,000, which is awesome. And then the Energy Trust of Oregon can be $1,200 or $900, and they have some caveats to getting that incentive. So one that I already mentioned was the 10 years of roof life. You have to have that to get the incentive. And then there's another one that we'll get into a little more later. There's also a new system, a new program, called Solar Within Reach. So this is put on by Energy Trust of Oregon. So it's a dollars per watt system. So Pacific Power, you get 70 cents per watt, and that's up to $4,200 if Pacific Power is your utility. If you have PGE, it's $1.40 per watt incentive, and that's up to $8,400, which is awesome. And then the income threshold for income qualified folks is honestly pretty generous. So for a household of 4, it's $106,944. Which is awesome. So this is a really great program, just trying to get solar to as many people as possible. And then the solar and storage rebate. So this is solar, also storage, if folks are interested in going with storage as well. So for the solar, it's $5,000 max. The storage is $2,500, and those can be put together. So if you're getting solar and storage at the same time, those can be combined, which is awesome. And this can cover up to 40% of cost for non-income qualified folks, and then 60% of costs this could cover for income qualified folks. So this is another really great incentive. And then what we're looking at here is just kind of a basic budget for a PGE customer. So some things to note is that this is just based on that average 6 kilowatt system. So again, this is just kind of an idea. Like I was saying earlier, like this 6 kilowatt is just a very basic average. So this is good to see what incentives can do, but it's not necessarily like the end all be all of the budgets. Your individual budget is going to be really particular to your individual setup, but this is just a good idea of what incentives can bring to the table. So starting costs, we have $20,000, and then we have that first incentive being added, and in the 2 columns, we've got income qualified and non-income qualified folks. So for the income qualified, the Energy Trust incentive could offer up to $8,400. For the non-income qualified, that's $1,200, which already brings down the net cost to $18,800 for non-income qualified, or $11,600 for income qualified. And then we've got that solar plus storage rebate added. So that's that $5,000, which brings down the out-of-pocket to customer to $13,800 for not income qualified and $6,600 for income qualified. So it's already been brought down quite significantly. And the reason why these are kind of organized in this way, where the out-of-pocket is here, and then we've got the first incentive and the second incentive, is because, like I said, these incentives will be worked on for you by your solar contractor. And then this last, the 26% federal tax credit, is one that you have to do on your own. But again, there's a benefit to this, because for non-income qualified folks, it can reduce the cost by $3,588. And for income qualified, it can bring it down $1,716, which brings down the final costs. This is before energy savings, to $10,212 or $4,884. So that's just with incentives on a very average system. You can see how much of an impact that has. It's pretty incredible. And then this is for a Pacific Power utility home. Again, we've got the income qualified, the not income qualified columns, initial costs being $20,000. The Energy Trust incentive is $900 for not income qualified, or $4,200 for income qualified, which brings it down to $19,100 or $15,800. And then we have that $5,000 kind of flat. which brings the out-of-pocket down to $14,100 or $10,800. And then you again, you have that 26% federal tax credit, which brings it down to $366 or $2,808, which again, just kind of showing the power these incentives have on reducing the price overall. So how can you get started? So a really awesome program that Energy Trust of Oregon has is Trade Allies. So these are contractors who have been vetted and approved by Energy Trust. So it's really great because it gets you in touch with folks who are qualified and have been tried and true. To get the Energy Trust incentives, you do have to use these Trade Allies, but they're very highly qualified. So it's honestly a really great benefit. And they're already familiar with the Energy Trust incentives. So it's great when they're working on that. And how to get in touch with these folks is the request. You can request quotes on the request custom analysis and bid part of Energy Trust of Oregon. So I'm going to pop that into the chat again. So I'm just going to put all those links I put in earlier just again. And I will pop that in. Okay, great. And so this is a really awesome tool. It takes less than like 5 minutes, I think. You just pop in your personal information and they will send you, get you in touch with different solar contractors, those Trade Allies, who then send you free quotes. So it's free, which is awesome. And then you also get some quotes out of that, which is great. So you can start getting an idea of what it costs and who to go with and what some different options are. Super easy to use. And then lastly, we kind of have the installation. So what does this look like? The contractor is going to complete all the paperwork. That takes the most time. The installation itself only takes 1 to 2 days. But the pre-work has to be done before the installation can go in. So that's kind of the approval, that's those inspections, that's getting the incentives all together. That happens all before the installation goes in. So that can take up to a couple of months. It's really hard to say. But the installation itself is only 1 to 2 days, so it's really quick. And then the contractor will manage any inspections in the future, so they'll keep an eye on things. All righty, Q&A. So thank you folks so much for sitting with me through all that. That was a lot of information. So thanks for being on board. I'm gonna go through the Q&As and answer what I can. I will say I've only been doing this work for about a month. So I'm going to do my absolute best to answer your questions. But if I can't answer something, or if I feel like I would be saying something misleading, I'm going to just take down the information, take down the question, and I'll send you an email later. So yeah, let's get into some of these questions. Just give me a second to read them. Okay, cool. So this is production. Okay. Okay, so there's a question here. If the grid goes out, my panels are still producing, so why do I need the battery? That's a great question. So your solar system is connected to the grid. So when the grid goes down, your solar system, what's going to be producing that power, will also go down. So that's often a misconception. Your solar system does not keep producing if the grid is down. However, if you have it connected to your battery, so if you're kind of thinking of the system that used to exist between your solar system, your home, and then the utility grid is kind of, like the circle. If you add a battery, you can add another offset to that circle. So if the grid goes down, what's going to happen is your solar system is then going to put power into the battery the way it would into the grid. So you're creating a new kind of cycle, if that makes sense. Whereas if you don't have a battery and the grid goes down, you won't be able to consume any energy or produce any electricity from your solar system. So you need that battery to keep producing. I hope that answered it. Okay. So someone said in 2021, I had an unusually high tax income. Most years I could have qualified for the 8,400. Can I ignore the unusual income when I apply for the rebate? So I'm not sure. That's one of those that I'd be hesitant to answer just because I'm not 100% qualified in all the incentives. But I can try to see if I can get more information and get it to you later. I believe if you get a quote, this is something your contractor, like I said, will kind of cover for you. So I'm not sure if they go back 1 year or multiple years in your taxes. But I will take this down and then try to look it up later. So sorry for not giving you a clear answer right now. Was the basic system sample budget with storage or without? So that was without storage. So thank you for that question. That was just kind of a basic example of a solar system without storage. And then someone asks, can you put solar panels on a wood shake roof? Yes, you can. You can put solar on any roof. That's something that you'll want to talk to your solar contractor about. But yeah, I do believe that you can put solar on wood. That should be fine. Yeah. Okay, any other questions? Let me look in the chat really quick. Okay, great. Yeah, any other questions? If not, I'm gonna do one last poll that I totally spaced on. So give me 1 second before everyone jumps off. I'm gonna launch this. If everyone could please answer it, that'd be really great. And if anyone has any more questions, please put them in. I will do my best to answer. And I'm gonna let this survey run just for a little bit. Okay. Okay, let me do this really quick. This is also my personal email, or my work email, not my personal email. But if anyone wants to send me an email with a question that they didn't, feel like they got answered, or if they have one that they don't feel like asking right now, please send me an email, and I'd be happy to reach out to you and talk more. Awesome. So yeah, if folks want to start signing off, I just ask that you answer the poll before you go. And thank you folks so much for sitting down with me this evening. This was a pretty quick one, but we covered a lot of information, so I appreciate everyone being here. Oh, looks like we got another one. What size are the panels? So that really depends on, they're all about the same size. I'm trying to think the dimensions. Okay, this is a rough estimate. I think they're about 3 feet, probably by about 4 feet, but that's also just a rough estimate. It depends on the system size you have. And so not all panels are exactly the same. So it's going to depend, I believe, on what your solar contractor usually goes with, or what they decide is best for your home. So it's often hard to make general statements because every system is really different and every contractor has their own modules that they like to work with. But yeah, they're pretty good size. They're definitely not teeny. Hope that answered your question. Can you go back to the slide with the photo of the batteries? Yeah, for sure. Oh, sorry. Let me go back to that and then I'll answer that question really quick. Okay. There it is. Okay. And then there was another question. Is there no difference between micro inverters and standard inverters? My contractor says no. Yeah, so functionally there's no difference. They both do the same thing, which is convert the DC energy to AC energy. It just depends on your specific system. So if you have a contractor who is saying to use one over the other, I would listen to your contractor. They're the professional. But that's all that the inverter is doing is changing the DC energy, which is what the PV panel is getting. And then AC energy is what we use in our home. So it has to be changed or, inverted to the DC to the AC. So that's all those inverters, micro inverters or standard inverters are doing. But yeah, again, just to reiterate, if your contractor has a preference for one over the other, I'd listen to your contractor. They know what they're doing. So yeah, hope that answered your question. All righty. Okay, well, thank you so much. Oh, I keep almost signing off, and then can batteries be added later? Yes, they can. Batteries can definitely be added later. So if someone already has an existing solar system, they can also add batteries to that. So yeah, that's an excellent question. The only thing to consider is when creating your system size, the solar contractor is going to be using energy information that exists before you've gone solar. So if you're thinking about adding a battery, or if you're thinking about adding an electric vehicle, that's something that would be important to tell your solar contractor so they can put that into creating your system size. They can contribute that in, just so that they can make sure that they're giving you enough energy for the future, so that they're creating a good plan and a good system for you that's sustainable, with anything you'd like to add to it. Okay, I'm gonna give one last chance for anyone to ask any questions. Alrighty, again, thank you all folks so much for sitting with me. I really appreciate it. This will be posted on YouTube, and then you'll also get a follow-up email with the same links from tonight, and then also I believe the link to the YouTube video if you want to come back and watch it. So thank you everyone so much. Have a good evening.